Are same-sex relationships one's personal choice or one's nature?
My dad's an officer. My mom's an accountant. I'm gay.
So a boy says, "Mom, I'm gay," and she goes, "Okay," and he gets locked up in a loony bin?
In one of the most well-known clinics in Moscow, there are psychiatrists who treat that. The scary thought is that my son will be gay. But it's not scary if he dies. Try it with 2 guys. That was my mom's recipe of how to get yourself inured to lesbianism.
What is your opinion as a doctor? Why are men attracted to men?
In the first 8 weeks, he develops as a universal being. What is key here is not why he wants it, but why it started to manifest itself more widely and more often than in the 1970s.
A guy attacked a gay couple, killed one with a knife, and he was acquitted.
If you are a closet gay, who are you going to tell this?
No one.
And they will use you every which way.
I kissed him first. No matter how hard I try to subdue this, it's always too much for me.
Don't you think it's weird if your dad finds out from Pavel Kompan's program?
The mother asked not to enclose the suicide note of her 14-year-old son in the case. He wrote, "You don't accept me. I'm gay. I just wanted to be myself, Mom. I'm sorry it never worked out."
Once in my program, Pavel Kompan at Home, in a survey that included 128 questions, I came across this one. Same-sex marriages, yes or no? Other questions were lick a PE teacher's armpit, kiss Zana Guzarova, next to how many continents are there on our planet? The answer shocked me. In front of me there was this active, modern, and well-bred young man who literally went ballistic and started yelling, "No, never," out of the question. I think I've never witnessed a similarly vicious outburst of rage in my life. And a saying occurred to me: the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I decided to make this program so that everyone who gets the same feeling of rage, which is based on lack of information, to get this information. And I hope it'll work. Okay then, Vlad, here's the deal. I just don't know how to be tactful in these questions. But what if they ask you what is your sexual preference? What do you say?
I'm gay. Yes.
All right. Now, if you look back at a small Vladik, when was it that you started to realize that you were not what, say, your mom thinks? So you get home from kindergarten and she goes, "So, Vladik, how was it? Did you like it? Which girl do you think is nice there?" When was it that you realized none of them?
I can say that this kind of thing didn't really happen in the kindergarten, but later, when I was around 12, I did sports, swimming, and as I remember vividly, this beautifully built man who would come to the pool, and every time he made me feel not aroused, but exuberant. It was genuine admiration, because he really had an aesthetically developed body. And with all his swimming gear on, he didn't seem to be wearing it. So perfect was his build. Really stunning, I can tell you. That was pretty much then, at the age of 12 or 13, when I started to notice some kind of attraction.
And did you observe anything similar around you in your life?
No, not at all. No porn, nothing like that. I really was aware of this discrepancy, and I realized there was something amiss in a way. On the one hand, girls do seem to look nice, but subconsciously I was paying a lot more attention to that swimming pool guy. That's how it all began.
Guys, I believe in my program, Pavel Kompan The Talk. So within this project, I try to bring you the best there is in this world. The general partner of all PRR projects is the dental clinic Dr. Kan. In my opinion, it's the best chain of dental hospitals on the territory of the Russia Far East. People from all over the world come here to get the most amazing veneer money can buy on the planet Earth. The clinic's motto is availability to all. The price of veneer for one tooth in the clinic has stayed the same for a number of years, which is 35,000 rubles. Those people are dedicated to their cause and make a point of placing the best quality veneer for the lowest price. That is why, guys, feel free to visit the Dr. Kan Clinic. Get that amazing veneer on your teeth and smile. The Dr. Kan Clinic will do all to ensure this smile. 35,000 rubles for one tooth. Pay in installments for like 100 years. They're very flexible in such matters. These people are really fanatical about the way they get about it. And all this to make sure you smile wide. Kishusha, I remember how we met. I came to Moscow. You dropped me a message in direct with that impressive list of your academic achievements. And I was stunned that there are people like that in our country. Could you tell us a bit?
Well, my first education is classical psychology, and the other thing is LGBT consultancy. I'm especially proud about the latter because I'm perhaps the only specialist like that in the country who can claim this. I graduated from a European university, the Geneva University. Sometimes I hear things like, all psychologists are kind of supposed to be LGBT friendly. For a start, we don't have licensed psychologists in our country at all. So what with this kind of supposed to part, it just doesn't apply here.
So you ride around the country with this mission and talk to people who...
It happened just like that. I had 30,000 rubles on my account, so I went and bought a ticket from Moscow to Blagoveshchensk and wrote in TikTok, "Hey everyone, I'll be wherever you need me." I decided to spend this year doing this and helping those who needed me. Today, it's been exactly 7 months since my trip began, and 25 cities.
What made you pursue this cause?
A couple of things. First, my personal story. I'm a lesbian, and I was born this way.
And the second?
And the second is all the cases I hear from friends and others around me. So, my personal pain and the pain of my clients.
You're saying pain.
I first fell in love when I was 4.5 years old. It was a girl from next door, and this attraction seemed weird. Then there was the summer camp. I was 12 to 13 and felt attracted to girls. And of course my mom, no different from any other mom in this country, said it was just an age thing that would pass.
Alla Valeryevna, can I just tell everyone here how I found you? Not many of you know this, but I am a trained doctor. And I really wanted us to have this small lecture, so unavailable to the general public, because it is supposed to be given to medical students at the medical university, and try to explain what the problem is on the medical level, but in plain English rather than in medical technical terms.
Pavel here was really a good student.
I got an A for all our colloquials.
No doubt about that. Thank you for inviting me over. I'll be happy to help with these questions that quite a lot of people are eager to find answers to. We are chatting quite informally here, but we'll speak about really serious things.
They keep asking me, but I just can't remember. Why do they teach this at the chair of anatomy?
It's all in the official syllabus. In anatomy, a certain portion of time is dedicated to the anatomy of the female sexual system, the male genitals, and the embryonic development of the genitourinary and excretory systems. That is why it is our field of expertise. Anatomy deals with ways of how a human may develop. We are going to speak about it informally. People have the proverbial blinders on and are too shy to talk about it. Many parents omit talking about it with their kids. They have this false shame, and so as a result, many of us know absolutely nothing about it by the time we grow up. As Goethe put it, one never goes so far as when one doesn't know where one is going. If a person doesn't know how the body functions, including sexually, how can they have anything to say?
Alla Valeryevna, how do you subdivide people, medically speaking?
In medicine, in anatomy, in physiology, and in other medical aspects, humans are still subdivided into two genders, only men and women. Just like that, only men and women. I will remind you that these two sexes are genetically programmed. XY stands for the sexual chromosomes of men, and XX is the female genotype. By contrast, American sexologists, for example, suggest that there are 108 gender-based varieties. Well, for us, 108 is sort of a little bit too much, don't you think? Seems amusing.
Valentina, we will have quite a short chat. I'd like to find out more about this. First of all, how should I introduce you, and what is the name of your organization?
The Moscow Community Center for LGBT Initiatives. It's the largest community center in Russia.
The largest one?
One of the most popular services
Yes.
is the crisis hotline with 20 operators.
I know a girl who is a lesbian, and she says, what's the point? We don't need it. I ask her why, and she says, I've never had a problem. She's an open lesbian, and the worst she gets is when some guys try to write her in Instagram, something like, hey, you're hot, let's have a threesome.
Look, first of all, we often say that everything's fine just to divert our attention away from horrible stuff that may happen. You say, I'm okay, and it's like there's nothing wrong going on in your life. Secondly, it all depends on your social position and opportunities. Let's see, an educated middle-aged woman with a degree, a great job, and an awesome car will hardly be a victim of a homophobe's attack on the subway. On the other hand, a wimpy-looking effeminate youngster who dyed his hair rainbow colors by way of expressing himself, he may not actually be gay, has a much higher chance of getting in hot water. But by and large, these dangers may befall you anywhere. This is a question of how you get on with your parents. At our center, we have a shelter, the only shelter in Russia for LGBT people who have been abused, discriminated, who have lost their homes, and so on. Parents may throw you out, or else you may lose your job if the boss finds out, who happens to be a homophobe and a tyrant to boot. Also, it may not be acceptable in the company's corporate culture.
When did you first have sex with a guy?
At 18. By 18, my gay nature had started to assert itself. It wasn't about my body language or effeminacy, but about my interest in young men. Also, I met a person who initiated me into all this. It was an acquaintance based on creativity. We had common interests in social life. At our institute, we had this spark. By the way, I kissed him first. This interest of mine got the better of me, and I decided to act.
Were you sober?
I was. Actually, next day I felt weird, to be honest with you. I was thinking that what I was doing was strange, but at the same time I needed it and felt comfortable doing it and liked it. I didn't feel it to be bad, but subconsciously I was aware of something else. I felt I must have turned from the main road.
To the forbidden?
Perhaps. But then again, says who?
Did you grow up in a nuclear family?
Yes, a great family.
A great family?
Yes.
And then at 4...
I wasn't a victim of any abuse.
So at 4 you realized you liked that girl? Her name was Nastya.
Yes, Nastya. And of course, it's all vivid in my memory. Nastya, a dark-haired girl with hazel eyes.
And then what?
Very beautiful. I was in some relationships at 12, at 13. We did some petting and things in camps.
With girls?
With girls, yes. We were together with one for around 18 months. I was 14 or so.
Did you tell your parents straight away back then?
We still have a very trusting relationship with my mom. I always shared my news with her, and she would say, you know what? Try it with 2 guys. That was my mom's idea of overcoming lesbianism. Doesn't work.
Many men use this recipe.
Yes, this corrective rape is unfortunately still so widespread today, as if we were in some ancient tribe or something. It's scary. There was a case with a mother whose son was a transgender. Biologically, he was male, but really effeminate. She gave it some thought and then said, "That's it. We're going to another country because I'm afraid for my kid." This kind of reaction is quite common too. But very often a kid is brought to a psychiatrist, and not very good one at that.
By the parents.
Then some treatment begins.
The psychiatrist gets to work.
Some psychiatrists begin treatment.
So we have psychiatrists in our country who prescribe treatment for this.
And there are quite a few of them around.
Is it really in this country? So a guy comes over with a boy and says, it's my son who says he's gay, and the psychiatrist prescribes some therapy?
I'll tell you more. In one of the most well-known clinics in Moscow, there are psychiatrists who treat that. But this therapy is all about adjusting one's sexual behavior.
So they attempt to change the behavior to suit this or that gender.
Correct. It's not the question of which clinic, but which specialist. If a psychiatrist sticks to ICD-9, which is something from 30 to 40 years ago,
Let me get this straight with ICD-9.
ICD-9 is the International Statistical Classification of Diseases.
Yes, diseases when homosexuality is classified as a disease which must be treated.
Yes.
Are there psychiatrists out there in our country who still attempt therapy?
There are. Others make another diagnosis, schizophrenia, which calls for drug therapy.
So a boy says, "Mom, I'm gay," and she goes, "Okay," and then he gets locked up in a loony bin?
You seem so surprised by this.
I'm outraged here, to say the least. I'm not surprised, I'm utterly appalled. 20 years ago at the medical university, professors told us the exact time when the embryo's gender is determined in the womb, as well as its future sexual preference. And I'm appalled that in the 21st century in London, you'll get jailed for a sideways glance at someone who may have chosen a different option. And in Russia, this someone ends up in a lunatic asylum.
It does take place. Some parents lock up their kids at home, keep their IDs, don't let them go to school, beat them up.
The parents?
Yes. Well, it's part of my job and life as an activist to have to deal with this sort of abuse on a daily basis.
What do you do about these maltreated kids?
We don't work with teens we have no authority to. What we deal with is the consequences of abuse.
What happens to them? Locked up in an asylum till they come of age?
It depends. A clinic may happen to have an adequate doctor who will re-examine and reconsider. Another good doctor will have a word with the kid's parents. You may be lucky to find a doctor like that, but not everywhere. Some kids are really locked up, their ID is confiscated, they are beaten up and essentially permanently grounded. Others are driven out of their homes. We can't work with teens without their parents' consent.
So
There
you
is a
can't...
law banning propaganda, and among others it applies to psychologists and specialists.
Let's explain this. If he was born a boy, why is he keen on other boys?
Essentially, it's like this. In the first 8 weeks of its prenatal development, the fetus in the womb develops as a universal being. Attention now. It has rudimentary sexual organs, both male and female rudimentary organs. It applies to absolutely any fetus, irrespective of the sex determined by its genotype.
I'll just clarify something here. So, dear homophobic gentlemen, in the first 8 weeks of your existence, each and every one of you was half girl.
Yes, that's the starting point. Until the 8th week, they say, let nature just take its course. After the 8th week, after the central nervous system has formed, alongside the peripheral nervous system and the cardiovascular system, a voice from above might say that here the most delicate comes into play. Now, the future male sexual organs develop from mesonephric ducts. Paramesonephric ducts, on the other hand, later develop into the female sexual organs. The fetus is complete with both kinds of ducts. So, schematically, it looks like horns and ears, and the fetus of either gender has the future sexual organs of either gender. Sometimes nature makes an error at this stage, or an external factor may be instrumental in this error, but the future mother is none the wiser. The mesonephric ducts, the future male organs develop from, suddenly stop developing, start withering, and undergo involution to the point of becoming rudimentary. At the same time, the paramesonephric ducts actively develop and grow, and in the end produce the female sexual organs. But incidentally, it was supposed to be a boy, the XY genotype, yet he develops the female organs, both internal and external ones. The average person is unaware of the fact that the external sexual organs are hardly definitive here. It's the internal ones that really matter. They determine how the body will develop, what hormones will be produced in pubescence. But the genotype gets in the way of this course. Thence the discrepancy. And one has to cope with it all life long. The same goes about females. When it was supposed to be a girl, it's the paramesonephric ducts that were supposed to actively develop. Instead, for some reason, they are reduced to rudiments. And instead, the mesonephric ducts went ahead to later develop into the male sexual organs. And what do we get? A girl, an XX genotype human, but her external, and which is infinitely worse. Internal sexual organs are those of a male, and that's it.
So, dear friends, let me clarify a bit. Now, in its prenatal development, development, the human is a fetus. It is virtually sexless until the 8th week. After the 8th week, the genitourinary system starts developing. Is that correct?
That's perfectly correct.
Right. So in the period from the 9th to the 12th week, the child's sex is determined. That is, in terms of its organs.
Yes.
Did I get that right?
Internal sexual organs.
Yes. So to put it crudely, it goes like this. The XX genotype is a girl. The XY genotype is a boy, a future man. So with gays, a boy may look like any other boy, but will develop as a girl. So what kind of man is a gay man?
It's a woman.
It's a woman, but she has the appearance of a man. Now, I don't agree that it's kind of a failure. The way I see it, it's like we can't really call dark hair a failure. It's just the way nature worked it out. So why are there just two types? There is XX, there is XY, like you told us and described, but there's also a third way. There is a third form which is probably even more violent. And I believe that in a million years' time, this third form will supersede the XX and XY types completely. This is my subjective opinion.
You know, you have a point here when you say that the tendency is on the up. It would do everyone a world of good if a child's gender were tested after it was born. But then again, it wasn't the person's conscious choice. They didn't want this kind of life, and it's not their fault. The mother would definitely not want this kind of thing to mess up the kid's life. Sometimes it happens, especially in communities like in the Caucasus. Go away. We are ashamed to have you in our family. We don't want to see you in our village. But what is shameful here? And why would you confront a kid with such serious matters? It's not what the kid chose consciously. Even if the child is confused about it all, it wasn't a conscious choice. If you're so keen on accusations, then come to that. If there is anyone to blame, that would be the parents. The paramesonephric and mesonephric ducts just swapped their roles in their development, and things happened the way we have just described. End of story. The child had absolutely nothing to do with it. There was a lack of information about it in our society. That's why, to find out about how orientation is determined, I went to study in Europe. There are theories like hormonal, natural, and so on. Actually, let me elaborate a bit. In the natural theory of sexuality, a person is just born this way. Like, I was born a lesbian, for example. There is a certain hormonal balance. I have more testosterone than other women, and so I've been attracted to women since childhood. Within this theory, the person starts experiencing sexual attraction at the age of 3 or 5, in the period when one's sexuality develops as such. Characteristically, the person doesn't feel aversion to the opposite sex. I don't mind having men around me. We may socially interact and so on. Another theory is the trauma theory, which is quite a widespread thing in society. A person experiences a grave trauma. It may be a rape, beating, killing, abuse from the dad. In this case, there is aversion to the opposite sex, and it is the main aspect of this theory. A man and a woman can't even imagine how to get along. In the third theory, it's in one's genes. Incidentally, it accounts for 25% of cases when one's orientation is determined genetically. There is yet a fourth theory that denies the other three. It's the social one. I can't say any of these four is better than the other three. It's up to everyone to choose.
Is there a propagandistic theory?
No, there isn't one. So, there are only 5. I'm talking about the fourth. There isn't one to do with propaganda. Now, according to the social theory, an adult male or female, a responsible person decides that in practical sense, it's more convenient to live with someone of the same sex. Whatever the reason, like a guy lives with a guy so that he doesn't have to put up with panty liners strewn all over the place. There is a beautiful romantic theory that claims that spouses are to remain ones forever, even transcending life and death. If in their previous life they committed some grave sin, in their next life they are to find themselves in bodies of the same sex so that they have to overcome all hardships on their way to being together.
Kira Yurievna, so you are a qualified behavioral therapist, a mental health counselor. If a person in an asylum is diagnosed with schizophrenia, will you be able to prescribe treatment?
Of course, there is a drug therapy option and a non-drug therapy one. I mostly deal with the latter.
Could you tell me me as a doctor, why are some men attracted to men and some women to women? What could be the reason? What's it all about?
It has to do with a special genetic background, but this is about manifested homosexuality.
Come again?
This is quite a popular version today.
What kind of boy is
A
born?
person is born as a boy, so it's a boy. No doubt about that. He is one. But in the part of the brain responsible for sexual attraction, he may have a peculiar configuration. For want of a better word, that may or may not manifest itself. What is key here is not why he wants it, but why he has started to manifest itself more widely and more often than in the 1970s.
Why has it?
When you see it and you talk about it, you are not shy to try it. Actually, there were a lot of homosexuals around in the 1980s, 1970s, but people were discreet about it. These days, you're free to discuss it. If you feel shy, you may be ironical about it, or else you are free to just speak your mind. So the percentage of gay people today and back then is quite the same. What has changed is the level of openness about it. Do you understand?
Did I get it right? Within this theory, a boy gets born and may turn out to be heterosexual, homosexual, or bisexual.
Yes.
So a bisexual boy may not choose men if he is protected against this choice by the society?
I wouldn't put it quite like this. If he meets a few women who initiate him, that may well predefine his preference. But if the first couple of his partners happen to be men, he might prefer men in the future.
And if he meets a woman, he'll love women and be happy and satisfied all his life.
Not necessarily, but chances are good.
So can we say that popularizing homosexuality may, to a certain extent, affect? Affect?
Yes.
The sexual choices of these
Latent
latent
ones and
bisexual people.
bisexuals.
And
Yes.
bisexuals.
That
To
will
choose in
influence
favor
the
of
choice
this.
of latent ones and
Interesting.
bisexuals.
I got it. Any more versions?
The second version is strictly to do with adolescents when they explore what is and isn't out of bounds and what makes them curious, like whether boys and girls kiss in the same way. Their parents may catch them doing it and not accept it as simply seeking behavior. Then they go on to take tough measures to subdue this, and so teens will carry on doing it simply out of defiance. A lack of support from their parents at the stage of first experiments may affect their response, which may be an expression of defiance.
Is it only about bisexual people or people of absolutely all sexual orientations? Absolutely all?
Speaking about adolescence, it's about all people, but then most bisexual individuals will later find themselves in a bisexual environment.
All right. Two versions then.
I believe these two are enough to make parents treat their children with tact and decency when they are teens and then grown-ups.
So people may be born heterosexual, homosexual, or bisexual. With bisexuals, it may develop or may not. So could you tell me, if someone's gay, can it not develop?
And it didn't used to either, because people would consciously make these compulsions off limits. There is a theory which gets confirmed more and more, claiming the most radical and belligerent homophobes to be latent homosexuals. If a person is happy about their sexual orientation and sexuality in general, why would they crusade against gay people? No point in going on the warpath. It's those who subdue this sexual need that go out there and start yelling in the hope that their cover will not be blown. They try to subdue their sexual compulsion and in essence tie themselves hand and foot.
I think there should be other reasons too. Being afraid for their children and maybe something else. I wouldn't really stigmatize these people.
Let's not stigmatize anyone at all, especially latent ones, who themselves are confused about it.
So not all of them would behave like that. There's just a focus group among them, right?
Well, there are people out there who like to be in the center of attention and who are keen on struggling against something and making a show of it.
Okay, Nikita, first I'll tell you why you're here. Quite a few years ago, I get this phone call from a friend of mine who says, let's see this play, All Shades of Blue. I ask, what's that? And he says, well, it's a fun play in this local youth theater. And I go, who's the playwright? And he says Reagan. I thought, okay, Reagan is a prominent name that speaks for itself, so we must be good. So I go there and see you guys on stage, and I was like, is it real? Because the ticket-collecting ladies are real enough, old ladies sitting in the audience are real, and jostling women urging you to your seat before the third bell are real enough. It's not like it's a modern theater. It's a regular Soviet-style theater, with Reagan as the playwright. There's nothing amiss. I find my seat, and then I realize I'm watching an LGBT performance. And at a certain point, I'm like, what's going on? And what shocked me was how all these men and women in the audience were sitting there and sobbing. Our typical Soviet men with rough manners who yelled at someone, "Come on, the third bell has sounded. We want some cognac a bit later." And these guys are sitting there sobbing their eyes out watching your performance.
The part of my character begins with the words, "Mom, Dad, I'm gay." Just this simple phrase. And then he says, it is no ordinary phrase. It's all more complicated. This is about a difficult situation in our country and for our people. Like you said, all those Soviet grannies and rough-looking men. It's difficult for these men, and probably it's difficult for me too. This is a story about a teenage boy who confesses to his parents that he's gay.
What's your character's name?
He has no name. No name. Just a boy. So I come out of the proverbial closet, and then my parents, my dad's an officer, my mom's an accountant, they start thinking what to do about it.
How did they react?
Shocked, of course. It's right here in the script. It's beautifully accurate, curt, and to the point. Dad, fucking hell.
So that's in the script? Fucking hell?
Exactly. And repeats it several times. Fucking hell. Fucking hell. And when the play was being censored later on, a lot of expletives had to go. But this phrase stayed because there is no other way to express this military guy's emotion when he hears his son telling them he's gay. A person comes along who I madly fall in love with. The impetus this person has given to my development is still with me today. Our relationship with a girl is over, and I decide that I want to live the way I feel comfortable.
Okay, but what if someone who's listening to us now will say, well, he clearly got involved with a bitch?
No way. Not at all.
So no matter what kind of woman, you would still have to ditch her.
That's right.
So do you believe you were born this way?
Yes, I believe I was. It comes in outbursts. No matter how hard I tried to subdue this, it's always too much for me. Sooner or later, you get back to it in your thoughts. Maybe have this trivial urge to view some porn.
Why did you try to subdue this?
I didn't know what I could do with it. I didn't realize I could live with it.
I decided to have a correct lifestyle. So I had a serious talk with my mom, and she said, yes, I get it about Nastya and things, but let's get real and think about a proper marriage with a man. Also, in my family, they would tease me, saying that no one would want to marry me with my kind of temper. So I set about to prove them wrong and get married, whatever my character. I've been married 4 times. I'm 28 years old. Nearly said 25 here.
25, like I am?
So 4 times. And at 17, after breaking up with Nastya, I started hormone therapy. Tests revealed that I had more male hormone than female hormone ones. Yet I was supposed to marry, have kids, start a proper family. So I agreed to this hormone therapy. It's years of life that wasn't my own. I was acting out a proper life scenario. That's why I started this tour across the country now. I want people in all remote corners of the country, be it gays, lesbians, heterosexuals, or asexuals. So any person, man or woman, could see me and say, oh, so I can live my life the way I want.
Were you happy?
I wasn't me. Can you be happy if you are not you?
How did it happen? So every day you went to bed with a person you had no feelings for?
I could have a chat with some of my lovers, get aroused, and then have sex with my husband. My last marriage was polyamorous. I just couldn't struggle with myself anymore. I was torn apart by inner conflicts. So when I fell in love with a girl, I went to my husband and I said, I can't do this anymore. By the way, all 4 of my ex-husbands knew I was a lesbian from the start. When we started going out, I would tell them right away. But men find it sort of fun.
What do you mean by getting aroused before sex? Did you meet with a girl before sex?
We could have a chat on the phone with her.
What did this sex mean to you? Was it self-coercion?
You know what? Yes.
Every day you went to bed and you rang someone up specially to get in the right mood, to get aroused, but in fact were violated, for want of a better word, by your own husband on a daily basis.
I might need a tissue now.
How did you cope? For 10 years.
That's the correct life for you.
Was your mom glad?
She was, yes. You know what? I'll tell you when I was appalled for the first time. Now, like my colleagues, I'm not so impressionable. It is horrible. But things like that do take place. The first time, I couldn't believe it was true when I was still working in Murmansk, my native town. There was this deaf kid in a military base camp, and they found him among his things a pocket calculator printed by an LGBT organization. They threw him outdoors wearing just a shirt when it was 36 degrees below zero. 36 degrees Celsius below zero, a polar night. He had no phone with him. Just think about it. Your child is handicapped.
Deaf.
Yes. A deaf child, and you throw him out. Then you coolly lock the door, sit in your warm home enjoying a cup of tea while your son is out in a flimsy shirt. In essence, this is a half-committed murder.
And your folks?
So my mom asked me, where do you live? And I say, with my boyfriend. She says, come again? I didn't catch. So I say, yes, that's right, with my boyfriend. And she goes, so you're gay then? And I say, yes, I am. That was it. She hung up.
Did she call back later?
Yes, we talked it over later on, so I gave her some details like how I lived, who I lived with, generally about things.
Did she cry?
No, she didn't.
She didn't cry.
No, she has nerves of steel.
A tough cookie.
She is.
Maybe she thought it would pass.
Perhaps. Because it's always been like, Vladek, have a look. There are some nice ones. Natashka, Lenka, Katka. Oh, so pretty.
So whose part is the most challenging in this play?
That of the dad.
The dad. Why is that?
It's all about this fear and horror. I remember the first time I saw the script at the first read-through. I found it fascinating. There is this inner struggle of a person, a fierce struggle. On the one hand, it's his son, but on the other, it's a gay, a kind of people he, as a Russian army officer, refuses to tolerate. That's one hell of a situation.
Does your dad know?
My dad doesn't.
Well, when he watches this program, he will.
I hope he won't.
Be assured he will. So, what will you tell him?
In my 25 years of life, I learned this. It doesn't matter what your sexual preference is.
That's your view. And his?
Well, if he has a problem with that, it will be his problem.
Do you two get on well?
We do, although we may not always see eye to eye. There are different things, you know.
Don't think that it's weird if your dad finds out from Pavel Kompan's program?
Perhaps, but time will show. I don't want to press it on him. He doesn't need to know it. His age is already taking its toll.
What do you feel when acting in this play? Do you see it as a tragedy?
Of course.
What do you feel?
It's hard to put it into words. You have to fight for your character for real. It's not like playing Moleri when you just act and the audience laughs. It's a 3-hour-long struggle.
Do you feel sorry?
Of course I feel sorry for him. I've kind of become this character. He's very close to me. He's such a small, confused teen, not even of age yet. He has no idea what to do. Even if he doesn't really want to be gay, he simply is. The most exciting thing is the reaction of the audience. The script is actually very explicit. That gets everyone's attention. It's always the same effect at the beginning of the play, especially in the first 3 years. We've been showing this play for 7 years. Usually, the lights in the audience are out during a play, and the actors just address the back of the audience they can't really see in the dark. And in our case, we see everyone in the audience.
What do you see in the people's eyes?
Some kind of horror. It's very obvious. At first, many just don't accept what they see and are pointedly quiet. There are some funny moments in the script about my character's first time with a girl. Really funny and well-written bits. But the people just don't laugh.
The moment I made up my mind to stop the hormone therapy, I told my mom about it and about all that had been happening.
What did you tell her when you talked?
The first talk was more like a one-sided shouting match. She yelled I was mental, out of my mind, that it was an occupational disease because I worked with those people, that if I prescribed some therapy to them, why didn't I get some myself? Then we were not on speaking terms for a couple of months. That year wasn't so hard for me. The 10 previous years had been, but the year it took my mom to accept this was hard for her. She aged at one point, had her hair cut short. She was really taking it badly, both in her mind and outwardly. The whole family took it very badly. It's all over now. We get in touch. She phones and asks how things are, how is my girlfriend, and so on.
So she's accepted you?
Yes, now she has.
But it took you 10 years of torture to earn this acceptance.
Well, not to earn it. I needed 10 years to realize this all.
I found out something about people who use Tinder for dating. The thing is that statistically, the number of people who suffer from blackmail, bullying, and things on Tinder every day has grown by 30%. We don't have any official stats in this country, though. So anyway, the point is certain individuals register in social networks for the sole purpose of harassing LGBT people, for bullying them.
You're talking about fake dates now.
Yes. Is it common?
Quite common. You register, search for love or sex, arrange to meet, just the way you would have done hundreds of times before. You arrive, perhaps the two of you even start kissing. Then the door is flung open, and some tough guys show up filming the whole thing. They threaten to blackmail you, saying things like, "Hey, this boy is still a minor. You'll get jailed for that." They may beat you up, too. If a guy asks me out, and I have a feeling that he is kind of weird, I'll tell my mom or friend, "Look, I'm going out with this guy, but he is kind of weird. Here's his number. We'll be going to this cafe. So be on standby just in case. And if you're a closet gay, who will you tell?"
No one.
And so they can use you every which way. Some guys will show up and attack you, and as you're being beaten, you're thinking, "Man, if those pics are out, my mom will have a heart attack, I'll lose my job, it'll be all over the internet."
You mean that a gay person in our today's society is someone who will be putty in anyone's hand, just because this orientation is something no one should find out about? And you're 99.9% sure that apart from you two, no one else will find out about this relationship?
No one must find out. That's what makes people vulnerable. They can't ask for help because they feel ashamed.
So you've played this challenging part for 7 years. No one would want to be in your character's shoes. You can't accept yourself, and your family can't accept you. Yet you all want to be happy. So as a person with this acting experience, what would you change in the world?
I always say this. I believe in love.
Same-sex marriages? Yes?
Yes. If two people are in love.
Should you be open about your homosexuality?
I don't think so.
How can you say yes to same-sex marriages then?
It's a different matter. I don't believe in gay pride. Why flaunt it? You are just a person with your own preferences.
I've heard from many LGBT people that everything's fine. Perhaps in their heads they feel such an enormous relief after admitting their preferences to themselves that they can't even imagine there can still be a greater relief. I've made my peace with myself. What could possibly beat that? I've watched this video today and it dawned on me what it's all about. I realized why an Oscar isn't given to a film with no LGBT people in the cast after watching this.
You got me all intrigued about this video.
Here.
Don't get me wrong, I'm so proud to be gay, but some days I hate it. I'm 25, and I feel like I'm just starting to find myself. I was 20 before I had my first real date with a boy that I liked. I never got to have a special first kiss, or never got to ask a cute boy to prom. I didn't get to bring home someone that I loved for my parents to meet. And now I'm at the point where all my straight friends are starting to get engaged and married, and I've never even learned how to date. It's not just me. In this revolving door hookup culture, it's so hard to find anything real. I know it can happen, but the older that I get, the less I believe that. My biggest fear is that I meet the one, but I'm so hurt and so damaged that I won't be able to open up to him and let him in. I just want to be happy.
What is scary is to never start it. That's what is scary. And you know what is scarier than that? Not to live to be 28. That's what's scary. My case, my story is not actually that bad. So I lived through all this, worked on myself, made some people's lives better, went on a tour around the country. But it's my story. I wonder if they're horrified by the thought that their 14-year-old kid may jump out of a window, for example.
It's horrifying stats. I've seen some European stats, and 35 to 70% of LGBT teens attempt to commit suicide in Europe.
It's even more scary that in Russia, these stats are non-existent. Here's a real story that happened in the town of Kemerovo. A police officer told me at a party, and by the way, he's anything but gay. There was a company of us, many people we usually travel together with. So in that chat, he said, you know what? A woman asked not to publish and not to enclose the suicide note of her 14-year-old son in the case. He wrote, you don't accept me. I'm gay. I just wanted to be myself. I wanted to be good, Mom. I'm sorry it never worked out. She hid this note and asked not to enclose it in the case. Just think about it. It's scary that my son will be gay, but not scary if he dies. That's the horrifying side of homophobia. And another horrifying story, I have a friend who now lives in Kiev. Civil partnerships are legalized there, so she left Russia to live there. It's horrifying that when her dad was coming home, I'm barely able to fight back tears now because they literally had to piece her together. Look at me. I'm feminine, so there has never been any threat to my life because I look like a regular heterosexual woman. But that friend of mine looks very masculine. So they assaulted her just for her looks. They beat her literally to a pulp. At 21, she lost the ability to walk. When her dad was coming home from work, he saw her lying in this puddle of blood in the street. He picked her up like a bundle, brought her to a hospital. The doctor said, your daughter will never walk again.
Alexander, could you tell me what it is you oppose?
I personally believe this kind of norm is unacceptable because it hardly fits in the society we live in. Secondly, it is being imposed so that these people are accepted. But how can society accept it if it is founded on the alliance of men with women? That's how nature intended it. Biologically, a baby can be had only by a man and a woman. It's our projection into the future. Otherwise, mankind will die out. I've seen a couple of gays on the subway on my way to work. I didn't come up to them, didn't say anything. I wasn't going to do anything. But privately, I wished they weren't so demonstrative in a public place. Excuse me, even most heterosexual couples don't do intimate things like that in public.
And what were they up to?
Kissing and hugging. This is pretty much what instigates hate and leads to killings. They themselves don't care. And that's bad.
Would you prefer them not to be around?
I would prefer them to behave decently and respect some limits. I don't want to have to observe this show.
So you would prefer not to see them?
I would prefer not to notice them around. You can't avoid seeing them if they do all this in a public place. I would prefer not to notice it.
What we know about is Moscow, not regions. We walk around, see these people in restaurants and cafes, but if you go deeper into the country,
I checked on the stats on the most LGBT-friendly cities. Exciting stuff, I can tell you. Strangely, St. Petersburg is at the top. What I was most surprised to find out was that the runner-up is Novosibirsk. Incidentally, Moscow comes third, and Vladivostok is the 12th out of the 12 surveyed cities. That's the last out of 12. And with St. Petersburg seen as an exceptionally tolerant city, let's not forget this. An LGBT blogger was killed there in 2019. Then someone else was killed in St. Petersburg that same year. And that in a gay-friendly city. Unbelievable. 2 public people killed since 2019 alone. Call that a gay-friendly city?
and that's only what we know.
That's what we talk about openly in the media. These are big sensational items. Then another killing. Also in 2019, a man was killed at the Kursky station in Moscow when a guy attacked a gay couple. Yeah, I read about it yesterday and my hair stood on end. So a guy attacked a gay couple because he thought they shouldn't be gays. He killed one with a knife and he was acquitted.
Yes.
How outrageous is that? A paradox. But how come?
There are certain rules what to include and what not to include in a criminal indictment. So you can't mention it was a hate crime because then LGBT people would have to be considered as a social group. As soon as we consider them as a social group, we admit that this community exists, needs some rights, and something has to be done about it. So all these crimes are classified either as regular killings or random assaults and beatings and so on.
Objectively, I realize that hypothetically, if my partner is in the hospital, I won't be able to come visit. He is actually not from my city, and even his parents would have trouble coming over.
And if he dies?
That's what I'm saying. And marriages are out of the question, like we talked about. I'm actually not that keen on getting married, to be honest. At the very least, there is clearly no such option. And having this stamp in your passport is so formalistic.
Why?
Well, I don't really care about this marriage thing, but there are other things that bother us, like we can't hold hands in public, although we naturally want to, and sometimes it's a torture to control ourselves. When we go out as a group of friends, those who are couples will want to get a bit physical, but we too have to restrain ourselves as if we're just friends. This friend zone, which is so forced already, is so ridiculous, because the whole gang knows about us, and sometimes this artificiality is extra comical and dumb, like super dumb.
Marriage and a chance of creating a family makes our life more meaningful. If I can't have kids, start a family, plan, and envision my future, my life's practically meaningless to me as a person. So what I will probably do is get some booze, do dumb things, and say, that's fine, seize the day. We don't know what tomorrow will bring. We say that the family is a social unit, so the family strengthens our society. So why not allow same-sex couples to bring up kids, make property over to each other, or divorce for that matter?
I sometimes hear people say, let them move in together, but why marry?
Then why do heterosexual people marry? We all want stability, an illusion of being in control and understanding what will happen tomorrow. We want to raise kids and feel that they're ours.
Can a same-sex couple raise a kid?
Of course. It's like this. Can a kid be brought up by its mother and a grandmother?
They can.
I have, by now, realized that all my dreams and aspirations to live the full family life in Russia, the way I want are castles in the air. I now realize that I can live the way I want anywhere but in Russia. It's quite disconcerting to realize that your native country keeps you down. It was weird for me to watch that video.
Which one?
About amendments to our Constitution. I was really puzzled because what we see is really a couple of typical pansies. Where's Mummy? Over there. You see? Your new mummy. The message here is, they'll never get to have this kid. But alongside guys like that, there are others among gay people. Like myself, for example. I'm different from those in the video. I'm not keen on sleeping around with a bunch of different guys. I'm monogamous. I'm psychologically stable and responsible. I work and earn money. I cook very well, and so I can make a great father and make sure my kid will have a great life.
So you're not going to get him a dress?
Not at all.
It's not a movie, it's the real world where we live. Homophobia has been consistently fostered throughout years and years.
What do you think is the reason?
That's a tough one. Globally, it appears that hate has to be channeled somewhere. LGBT people are the most vulnerable group. It's already lame and downright indecent to target some ethnic minorities for that.
Then LGBT people.
Then LGBT people.
You know what? I am against this reckless LGBT permissiveness myself. Seriously, I don't support it. I would allow a person to bring up a kid if the person were capable of it.
Would you like to have a biological kid?
Yes.
Not adopt one.
Well, if I had to choose, I'd by all means go for a biological one.
Does it so happen that on stage you stop being actors and transform into your characters?
Totally. That's what I'm saying. In the scene with the mother when she's making steak, I really fall apart. It's a scene right after they take him to an exorcist, and the boy runs away. Then he comes back home and sits down at the table with his mom. She goes, "Maybe you have a boyfriend. Why doesn't he come round?" And my character remembers this video from the net where a guy's boyfriend came over to his place to get acquainted with the guy's mother and ended up with 3 broken ribs after her vicious assault. So he remembers this episode. He doesn't have a boyfriend at the time at that point in the play. He says, "No, I've no boyfriend." And she goes, "Maybe you aren't gay then, after all." And he says, "Yes, I am, and I've made my peace with it." And she goes, "Maybe we could set you up with a girl. Tanya at work has this really nice daughter, very pretty." And he says, "No, you don't get it. I don't fall for girls. I can do nothing about it. Nothing."
I'd love to, but...
That's right. I can't change it. Nor can you, nor Dad. You don't get it. I don't want any help from you or anything. I only want you to understand. That's what he says. All I want is for you to understand me. In that scene, he elaborates on this theme, saying, "You don't get it." And Dad even refused to have dinner with us. Sometimes, when we get into this scene particularly well, I linger in that state for a while and can't go back to being myself again. One scene comes immediately after another, and I'm on stage throughout the whole play. So I'm supposed to quickly switch over to the next scene. I would sometimes really break down and be not Nikita the actor on stage, but that boy who's lost, and I really couldn't help it and sobbed there for real.
Of course, the issue is very complex. We can hardly come to conclusions after watching just this one program. I'd like to finish with one more story. In 1965, John Money, a PhD in pediatrics, a proponent of the theory of gender neutrality, carried out an experiment that almost made a breakthrough in the minds of practically the whole world. He found a boy whose external sexual organs were injured when the circumcision procedure did not go according to plan. He approached the parents and suggested starting hormone therapy and bringing the kid up as a girl. It was all plain sailing until the kid turned 14. The doctor got standing ovations from the entire world, until at 14, the kid came over and said, "I am a boy." The boy refused to get on with the therapy, and at the age of 38, he committed suicide. The 21st century, with such a bulk of information accumulated by now, we still try to dictate what to do to be happy. Is it morally right?